Nia Carter sat in the third row of a rooftop wedding in a burnt orange wrap dress, watching the man she almost married slide a ring onto her mother's finger. The New York skyline glittered behind them. Golden hour doing what golden hour does, making everything look like it was meant to be. The guests were in their finest. Somebody's aunt was already crying. A man near the bar was recording on his phone with his elbow out like he was at a concert. The officiant's voice carried over the warm evening air, steady and ceremonial, wrapping the whole obscene thing in the language of destiny. Nia's hands were folded in her lap. Her face gave nothing away. She had practiced this. In her bathroom mirror, in the car on the way here, in the elevator ride up to the rooftop where the hostess smiled and said, "Beautiful evening for a wedding, isn't it?" And Nia said, "It really is," without blinking. She had dressed carefully. Burnt orange because it was confident without being loud. She had arrived exactly on time, not early enough to seem eager, not late enough to cause a scene. She had found her seat, opened the program and read every word of it like it was a patient intake form. Like it was information she was processing professionally. Like her name wasn't listed inside it under the heading Family of the Bride. Julian Hayes was in a white suit. Course he was. Light-skinned, polished, the kind of handsome that requires maintenance. He stood at the altar with the easy confidence of a man who had never once doubted that the room was arranged for his benefit. And maybe it always had been. Nia had believed that confidence once. Had called it ambition. Had covered his slow months and co-signed his vision and made space for his needs at the table she built with her own hands. Her mother was radiant. Vanessa Carter, 54, in ivory silk. Composed the way she always was, like a woman who had decided decades ago that she would never again be caught off guard. Her posture was perfect. Her smile was measured. She looked like someone who had won something. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she'd done to get here. Nia told herself she was fine. Here's what nobody tells you about the human nervous system. When the brain perceives a threat it cannot physically escape, it activates the same stress response as a predator encounter. Cortisol floods the body, heart rate climbs, and the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational decision-making, goes quiet. The body doesn't distinguish between a lion and a betrayal. It just knows something is wrong. Nia's body knew. She just hadn't listened yet. What she didn't see, what she couldn't see from the third row, was the man standing at the edge of the terrace. He wasn't part of the wedding party. Wasn't watching the ceremony at all. He stood with his hands in his pockets, dark suit, completely still among all that motion. And his eyes were on Nia. Only Nia. With the kind of attention that doesn't happen by accident. His name was Cha Duan. And before this night was over, Nia Carter was going to need every ounce of the strength she'd spent her whole life giving away to other people. This story is for every woman who was told she was too sensitive, right up until the moment everyone realized she was right. Subscribe to the channel right now so you never miss a single second of this cinematic journey. The story is moving fast, and you'll want to be here when the final reckoning hits. She had almost not come. 3 times in the 2 weeks before the wedding, Nia had typed out a message to her cousin Dana saying she wasn't going to make it. 3 times she had deleted it. Not because she wanted to be there. Because not going meant confirming what everyone was already quietly saying, that Nia Carter was still broken, still bitter, still unable to accept that life had simply moved on without asking her permission. So she came. With her burnt orange dress and her folded hands and her face that gave nothing away. Program listed Julian Darnell Hayes and Vanessa Marie Carter in gold script. Beneath their names, a Bible verse about love being patient. Nia had read that verse at her grandmother's funeral. She did not find it comforting now. Here is what you need to understand about how she ended up in this seat. 3 years ago, Nia met Julian at a fundraiser for a youth advocacy nonprofit in Midtown. She was presenting a case study on foster system reform. He was there networking. He called it building community, which she would later understand was how Julian described any room he entered looking for leverage. He was charming in the particular way men who have studied what women like Nia respond to, attentive, curious, the kind of listener who makes you feel like the most interesting person in the room. She was 24. Newly promoted. Careful with people in the way that professionals who work with trauma learn to be. She let him in anyway. Within 4 months he had moved into her Decatur apartment and renamed it their place without a conversation about it. Within a year he had added his name to a joint savings account she believed was for their future. Within 2 years the engagement ring arrived, modest, tasteful, exactly right, and Nia said yes in a restaurant in Ponce City Market while her mother sat across from them smiling the smile Nia had always worked so hard to earn. She should have noticed that Vanessa looked at Julian first. Nia worked rotating case hours, early mornings in court, long afternoons in family visits, evenings finishing documentation. Julian ran a one-man consulting firm that had promising months and brutal ones, and she covered the brutal ones quietly because that is what you do when you believe in someone. She paid their rent when his pipeline dried up. She absorbed his business registration at her address because his credit history made lenders nervous. She smiled at his networking events and made conversation with his clients' wives and told herself this was partnership. That the imbalance was temporary. She Googled things like how to support an ambitious partner without losing yourself. She followed every piece of advice. She was patient. She did not nag. Then 8 months ago, Julian sat across from her at the kitchen table in the apartment she leased and said, calmly looking directly at her, "I need someone who matches where I'm going, Nia. This isn't working anymore." He was out within a week. Psychologists call this sudden withdrawal in close relationships a form of emotional ambush, the deliberate concealment of an exit plan. Studies show victims often blame themselves for not seeing it coming. The truth is they weren't supposed to. She called her mother that night, sobbing in a way she hadn't since her grandmother's funeral. And Vanessa listened. Questions. Careful ones. About the accounts they shared. About Julian's business. About what Nia had signed and when. Nia thought, she's protecting me. She thought, this is what mothers do. 3 months later, Vanessa's voice on the phone had gone slightly strange, too careful, too deliberate, and said, "There's someone I've been spending time with. I want to be honest with you." Nia had felt the floor shift. But she had told herself she was being dramatic. She had told herself that a lot. Now Julian was saying I do to her mother in a white suit against the Atlanta skyline, and Nia was in the third row with her hands folded and her face composed, watching the public celebration of something she still didn't have the full shape of. She didn't know yet that shape had a name. She didn't know yet that she was sitting inside the last night of the life she'd been living, and the first night of the one she was about to fight for. She just knew that something was wrong. Her body had known for months. The ceremony ended the way these things do, with applause and relief and the particular chaos of 200 people suddenly needing to find a drink. Nia stood, smoothed her dress, calculated the distance between her chair and the elevator with the accuracy of someone who had been planning her exit since she arrived. 3 minutes. Maybe 4 if someone stopped her. She would say congratulations to whoever stepped in her path, keep moving, press the lobby button, sit in her car in the parking deck until her hands stopped doing the thing they were doing, not shaking exactly, more like humming, like her body was running a frequency her mind hadn't authorized. She made it to the edge of the terrace. She did not make it to the elevator. Nia Carter. She turned. He was standing just outside the string lights where the terrace gave way to shadow. Dark suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt open, not casual, just unbothered. Korean, early 40s, with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from calm so much as from absolute certainty. The certainty of a man who has never needed a room to quiet down for him because rooms simply do. She didn't recognize him. "I'm sorry," she said. The social worker's reflex, apologize first, orient second. "Do we know each other?" "Not well," he said. "My name is Cha Duan." He said it without performance. Like information, not introduction. 3 years ago you were assigned a child welfare case. A 5-year-old boy. Korean. He'd been in the foster system for 14 months. Something shifted in Nia's chest. "The agency wanted the case closed," he continued. "There were people connected to the placement who had reasons to keep it quiet. You escalated it instead. You went outside proper channels, filed directly with the state office, and got the child placed with his biological family within 60 days. He paused. You lost your position at the agency within the same period. Nia was very still now. "His name is Min Jun," Duan said. "He's 8. He's home. He goes to school in Doraville. He has a gap in his front teeth and an opinion about every meal he's served." Something moved through his expression, not sentiment exactly, but the controlled proximity to it. "He is my cousin's son. My cousin died in a car accident 14 months before you took that case. Min Jun was all that was left of her." Here is something that reframes everything. The U.S. foster care system holds over 370,000 children on any given day. Fewer than half will be reunified with family. Most caseworkers carry caseloads 3 times the recommended limit. Children who make it home usually do so because one person refused to close the file. Nia had been that person. She just hadn't known what she was holding. I've been trying to find the right way to repay that debt for 2 years, Duan said. I haven't found it yet, but I'm at table 4 tonight if you need anything. He said it plainly. Not like an offer, like a fact. Then he turned and walked back into the reception, moving through the crowd the way water moves, as if every space simply made room for him. Nia stood at the edge of the terrace for a long moment. Then she went inside. She found her table, sat down, accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and held it without drinking. Across the room, Julian was laughing at something a man in a blue suit had said. Vanessa stood beside him with her hand on his arm, composed and correct, the way she always was. They looked like a photograph, the kind you'd frame. Marcus appeared from the direction of the bar and dropped into the seat beside her. Her oldest friend, a high school history teacher with kind eyes and the permanent look of a man processing too many things at once. He'd come because Nia asked him to, because she'd told him she couldn't do this alone and he was the one person she trusted enough to admit that to. You okay? He said. I'm fine. He looked at her the way he always did when she said that. Like he knew the translation. There's a man here, Nia said quietly. He just told me he owes me a debt. He said it like he meant it. Marcus followed her eyeline across the room to where Duan had settled back at his table, one hand around a glass of whiskey, eyes moving through the room with the unhurried attention of someone conducting surveillance in a tuxedo. Who is he? Marcus asked. I don't know exactly, Nia said. What she did know, what she felt in the specific part of her body that years of social work had trained to recognize danger, was that Cha Duan was the most controlled person in this room. And that he had chosen to speak to her. Not Julian or Vanessa. Her. That meant something. She just didn't know what yet. Her phone buzzed on the table. A bank notification. She glanced at it out of habit, the way you do when you've learned to document everything. One unfamiliar withdrawal. She almost ignored it. She almost let it go. Smash that subscribe button and let us know in the comments who you are rooting for. Your support keeps these epic tales coming, so subscribe and join our community today. The withdrawal was $201,000. Nia stared at the notification for 3 seconds. Then she opened the app. The transaction was listed under a joint savings account she and Julian had opened 2 years into the engagement, a future fund, he'd called it, with the easy confidence of a man naming things he didn't intend to keep. She had assumed it was dormant. She had assumed when he left that the account had simply followed him out the door the way everything else had. She had not assumed her name was still on it. She had not assumed there was anything left in it to take. She pressed into the account history. 14 transactions over 19 months. All withdrawals. All clean, deliberate amounts, nothing large enough to trigger an automatic alert on its own, everything designed to read like ordinary movement. The balance had been $222,000 when she last checked it. 18 months ago. Before the breakup. Before everything. It was $21,000 now. Financial psychologists call this financial infidelity, the deliberate concealment of money-related deception within an intimate relationship. Studies estimate it affects 1 in 3 American couples. It is, by legal definition in most states, fraud. Nia's hands went very still. She closed that account. Then the next one. Then the next. This is the part that takes the breath away, not the discovery itself but the architecture of it. Patience required to build something like this. Coldness. Julian hadn't panicked and grabbed what he could on the way out. He had been systematic. Methodical. He had constructed an entire financial shadow life using Nia's name, her credit, her social security number, and her mother's access to the documents that made all of it possible. But we are not starting there. We are starting earlier. Much earlier. We are starting in Vanessa Carter's kitchen on a Sunday evening 8 months before the wedding, because that is where the real story lives, not in the bank app, but in a house in Cascade Heights where a mother sat across a kitchen table from her daughter's fiancé and made a decision. Vanessa had known Julian Hayes for 14 months before Nia introduced them. Let that settle. Nia brought him to Sunday dinner in month 4 of the relationship, bright-eyed and careful the way you are when you're introducing someone to a mother who doesn't give approval freely. Vanessa had been polite, measured. She'd asked Julian the questions a mother asks, his family, his work, his intentions, and Julian had answered all of them smoothly because Julian always did. Afterward, Nia had called her on the drive home. "So? What do you think?" Vanessa had said. "He's very charming." Not, "He seems to love you." Not, "I can see why you're happy." Just, "He's very charming." The particular tone of a woman filing information away. What Nia didn't know was that Julian called Vanessa 3 days later. Said he wanted to take her to lunch. Said he valued her perspective. Said a man who wanted to marry her daughter should invest in the relationship with the mother. Vanessa had agreed because it seemed reasonable. Because she was a woman who respected deliberate people and Julian was nothing if not deliberate. They met 4 times before Nia knew they had met once. That is not a mother being charmed. That is a door being opened from the inside. The first time Vanessa gave Julian something that was Nia's, her old banking login, still active on a tablet Nia had left at the Cascade Heights house years ago, she told herself it was minor. That she was just helping him understand their shared finances better. That she was being practical. Helpful. The second time, she gave him the account number for the investment fund Nia's grandmother had left her. The one with $180,000 in it that Nia had never touched because it felt like something to protect. She told herself Julian would put it to good use. The third time, Julian placed a document on Vanessa's kitchen table and slid a pen across to her without a word. Vanessa had read it, slowly because she read everything slowly because she was not a careless woman, and then she had picked up the pen and signed Nia's name. What the text messages would later reveal, recovered by a forensic accountant from a deleted thread, was that this moment had been planned for 6 weeks. But we are in the present now. We are at the reception. Nia is at her table with a champagne glass she hasn't touched and a banking app that is rearranging everything she thought she understood about the last 3 years. Marcus is beside her, watching her face with growing alarm. The jazz quartet has started. Julian is leading Vanessa to the dance floor. Nia watches her mother move. The ivory silk. Perfect posture. The measured smile directed at Julian like a woman who has finally, after a very long wait, received something she felt she was owed. And for the very first time, Nia stops seeing her mother as the woman who raised her. She starts seeing her as a stranger who had access to everything. Her phone buzzes again. Another account. Another name she recognizes. Another balance that shouldn't be what it is. She looks across the room at table 4. Duan is already looking back. The second alert came at 8:47 p.m. Nia saw it the way you see something you already knew was coming, not with surprise but with the specific dread of confirmation. Credit card. Her name. An address in Buckhead she had never lived at. A balance of $111,400 spread across purchases at stores she had never entered. A Rolex boutique on Peachtree. A men's tailor in Virginia Highland. A weekend stay at a resort in Sea Island billed under her social security number with Julian's phone listed as the contact. She opened a third account. Then a fourth. By the fifth, her champagne was warm and untouched and Marcus had stopped making conversation because he could see from the particular quality of her stillness that something had broken through the composure she'd been maintaining all evening. Not her face was still controlled. It was her breathing. Shallow. Deliberate. Kind you do when you're keeping yourself together through sheer decision. Nia. Marcus put his hand on the table near hers. Not on it. Near it. Talk to me. She turned the phone toward him. He read. His jaw shifted. He scrolled up, then down, then back up again like the numbers might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. When did you? Just now, she said. All of this is... Yes. Marcus set the phone down slowly. He was a history teacher. He spent his days explaining to teenagers how catastrophes are built incrementally, one policy, one compromise, one quiet decision at a time, until the disaster looks inevitable in hindsight. He recognized the architecture of what he was looking at. You need to call someone, he said. I know who to call. She picked up her clutch, found the card Duan had given her, and typed a message before she could talk herself out of it. I think something is very wrong. Can you come to the lobby? The response came in under 90 seconds. On my way. Marcus walked her to the elevator. She told him to stay, that she was fine, that she just needed air. He looked at her the way he always did when she said she was fine, like a man translating from a language he'd learned to read over 30 years of friendship, and said he'd be at the bar and to text him if she needed anything and that he loved her. She pressed the lobby button. The doors closed. Here's something worth knowing. Under the Identity Theft Enforcement and Restitution Act, financial fraud using another person's identifying information carries federal penalties of up to 15 years. But fewer than 1 in 4 victims ever report it, most because they don't know the law applies to them. Most because the person who did it was someone they trusted. The lobby was quiet in the way hotel lobbies get late in the evening. Marble floors, low lighting, a concierge behind a desk pretending not to notice the woman in the burnt orange dress sitting in a corner chair like she was deciding something permanent. Duan arrived in 4 minutes. He sat across from her without being asked, without preamble, without the performance of concern that people do when they want credit for showing up. He just sat. Present. Waiting. She handed him the phone. He read the way he did everything, without rushing, without reaction, working through each account with the attention of someone who had spent years reading situations other people missed. When he finished, he set the phone on the table between them and looked at her directly. How long were you engaged? 3 years. Did your mother have access to your financial accounts during that time? Question landed differently than it should have. Should have felt intrusive. Instead, it felt like someone finally asking the right thing. She had emergency access, Nia said. To my main account. My old tablet was at her house. It had the banking app still logged in. I never thought to, she stopped. I trusted her. Duan was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the lobby's glass front, Atlanta moved the way it always did, indifferent, bright, alive to its own business. Somewhere above them, 200 people were celebrating something built on the financial skeleton of the woman sitting in this chair. I'm going to give you 2 names, Duan said. A forensic accountant and a criminal attorney. Both in Atlanta. Both serious people. He reached into his jacket and produced a card. Cody James, certified forensic accountant, a Midtown address. Call Monday morning. Tell him I referred you. He'll see you the same day. Nia took the card. There's something you should know about me, Duan said, before you decide whether to use that. She looked at him. He told her. Not everything, but enough. Organized crime. Real danger. Associations that follow a person. Enemies that transfer. He said it the way you read a contract aloud, not to discourage, but because the terms mattered and he wasn't willing to obscure them. When he finished, Nia was quiet for a long moment. You believed me, she said finally. You read those accounts, and you didn't ask if I was sure. You didn't suggest I might be misreading it. The evidence is clear, Duan said. Only someone who wasn't looking would suggest otherwise. She met his eyes across the table. Then I'll call Monday, she said. This story isn't slowing down, it's just getting started. If you felt every word of that, you already know you belong here. Hit subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell because the next chapter drops before you're ready, and trust me, you do not want to be the last one in the room when it does. This is your world now. Don't leave it. They stayed in that corner of the lobby for 2 hours. Not because there was nowhere else to go. Because the conversation kept finding new rooms to move through and neither of them reached for the door. Duan ordered tea from the night staff. A Korean barley tea, roasted and warm, the kind his mother used to make on winter evenings in Doraville when he was first learning that America had different rules for different people depending on how much they had and how well they could perform not needing it. He ordered a second cup without asking Nia if she wanted one. She picked it up without thanking him. Felt somehow like the most natural exchange of the evening. She walked him through the accounts chronologically. The joint savings opened in month 14 of the engagement. The dormant investment fund, her grandmother's, untouched for 6 years, $180,000 she had kept because it felt like something to protect. The credit card opens 7 months before the breakup. The business loan in her name tied to a commercial property in Buckhead she had never seen. The condo deposit drawn 3 weeks after Julian ended the engagement, when she was calling her mother every night crying, when her attention was entirely consumed by grief and she wasn't checking anything. Timing was surgical. He planned the exit before he announced it, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Duan said. Simply. Without softening it. How long do you think? Based on what you've shown me, the earliest transaction is 19 months ago. The engagement was 3 years. He held her gaze. He was building this while you were still in it. Nia absorbed that. Researchers at the University of New Hampshire found that financial abuse, controlling, exploiting, or sabotaging a partner's economic resources, occurs in 99% of domestic abuse cases. It is almost always the first form of control and the last one victims identify. 'Cause it hides behind love. He needed my mother, Nia said slowly. He couldn't have accessed everything he accessed without someone on the inside. Duan said nothing. He let her get there herself. She gave him the tablet login, Nia said. She had my grandmother's account information because she helped me set it up. She co-signed the boutique loan my cousin needed years ago, and her name is listed as a secondary contact on 2 of my oldest accounts because I added her after my grandmother died and never removed her. She stopped. I never removed her because she was my mother. Because it didn't occur to me that I would need to protect myself from her. The lobby was very quiet now. I need to ask you something, Nia said. Go ahead. Why are you here? This wedding specifically. Julian's networking event didn't bring you. A man like you doesn't attend events because someone mass-mailed an invitation. She watched his face. Why tonight? Duan set down his cup. I've had people aware of your general situation for about a year, he said. Not apologetically. As information. Not intrusively. I knew where you worked. I knew the engagement had ended. When the wedding announcements circulated through Julian's business network, a contact flagged it to me. I saw your name listed as family of the bride. He paused. I came because I wanted to see for myself that you were all right. And was I? No, he said. You were performing all right. There's a difference. Nia looked at this man, organized crime self-declared, sitting across from her in a hotel lobby at 1 a.m. with barley tea, telling her the truth with the consistency of someone who had decided long ago that honesty was more efficient than its alternative. Min-June, she said. Tell me about him. Something shifted in Duan's expression. Not softness exactly. The controlled proximity to it, the way a man who has learned to keep feeling at a distance still lets it get close enough to be visible. He took out his phone, turned it toward her. A photograph, a gap-toothed boy in a school uniform, squinting into the sun, one hand raised against the light like he was saluting something only he could see. He starts 3rd grade in the fall, Duan said. He has strong opinions about rice. He corrects his teachers when they mispronounce Korean words and is baffled that this surprises anyone. A beat. He asked me once who the woman was who helped him come home. I didn't have a good answer. Nia looked at the photograph for a long time. Tell him she figured it out eventually, she said. Duan looked at her across the table. Really looked. The way people do when they stop cataloging and start seeing. Monday morning, he said. James. Tell him everything you told me. He stood, smoothed his jacket, and picked up both empty cups to set them neatly on the tray. A small, unhurried gesture that stayed with her later, the particularity of it. And Nia. He said her name the way he had on the terrace, like he'd been holding it carefully. Whatever you find, and you will find more, don't talk about it publicly until you have legal counsel. Not to friends. Not to family. He let the word family sit there between them without elaborating. He didn't need to. She watched him cross the lobby, nod once at the concierge, and disappear through the glass doors into the Atlanta night. Then she sat alone for a moment with her empty cup and the full weight of what she was walking into. She wasn't afraid. That was the thing that surprised her. She pulled out her phone, added Cody James's number, added Duan's. Opened her banking app one more time and screenshotted every account, every transaction, every date. Then she went back upstairs to get her bag. The reception was winding down. Julian and Vanessa were saying goodbye to guests near the elevator bank, hand in hand, glowing with the particular satisfaction of people who believe the hard part was over. Nia walked past them without stopping. Vanessa called her name. Nia kept walking. The hard part, she thought, hasn't started yet. Monday came the way Mondays do after the kind of weekend that restructures something permanent inside you. Gray, indifferent, the city already at full speed before Nia had finished her first cup of coffee. She called Cody James at 8:03 a.m. He picked up on the second ring, listened without interrupting while she summarized the accounts, the dates, the amounts, and said, "Can you be here at 11? She was there at 10:45. His office was on the 14th floor of a building on Peachtree Street, clean, efficient, the kind of space that communicated competence without performance. James himself was mid-50s, Nigerian-American, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and the particular quality of attention that belongs to people who have spent decades finding what other people buried. He reviewed everything she'd brought, screenshots, account histories, the business loan documentation she'd pulled from the county records website at 2 a.m., and said nothing for 11 minutes. Then he said, "This is real. And it's been going on longer than you think." Those 6 words rearranged the air in the room. He walked her through the process the way a surgeon explains a procedure, not to frighten but because you deserve to understand what's happening to your own body. First, a full credit pull from all 3 bureaus. Second, a forensic trace on every account bearing her name or social security number opened in the last 5 years. Third, a formal fraud report filed with the FTC and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Fourth, a criminal attorney. He had a name, a woman named Adrienne Cole who specialized in financial crime cases and had, in James's words, never lost a fraud case she believed in. Nia signed the authorization form. Her hand didn't shake. She filed the police report that afternoon at the Zone 6 precinct in East Atlanta. The officer who took her statement was professional and thorough and gave no indication of what he believed or didn't believe. She drove home, made herself dinner, and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open to the GBI's online fraud portal, uploading documents until her eyes hurt. Then her phone rang. Marcus. She almost let it go to voicemail. She answered because he was Marcus, because 30 years of friendship earned a pickup even on the worst nights. "Hey," he said. His voice had the particular careful quality of a man who had been rehearsing. "I've been thinking about Saturday. About what you showed me at the reception." "Okay," she said. A pause. "Have you talked to Dr. Reeves? Before you do anything official, I mean. I'm not saying you're wrong, I just think maybe. Marcus, talking to someone might help you make sure you're approaching this from the right. I filed a police report today," she said. "I have a forensic accountant. I have a criminal attorney. I'm approaching it fine." Silence. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay. You've been through a lot, Nia. I want to make sure this is coming from a clear place and not from..." She ended the call. Gaslighting was first documented as a psychological phenomenon after the 1944 film Gaslight, in which a husband systematically manipulates his wife into doubting her own perception. Clinicians now recognize it as a primary tool of coercive control, and its most effective delivery system is the people closest to the victim, who often participate without knowing they're doing it. Dr. Reeves called 2 days later. Vanessa had reached out to her, as a concerned parent, the voicemail said, to share that Nia seemed to be in a destabilized emotional state following the wedding. Dr. Reeves wanted to schedule an additional session. Her voice was warm and professional and gave no indication that she found anything unusual about a mother calling her adult daughter's therapist unprompted. Nia sat with that for a long moment. Then she called and scheduled the session. 'Cause she wanted to look Dr. Reeves in the eye and say what she had to say out loud to someone whose job it was to listen. The session was on a Thursday. Dr. Reeves sat across from her in the familiar chair, notepad on her knee, expression open and carefully neutral. Nia laid out everything, the accounts, the dates, the forensic accountant, the police report, the attorney. She spoke for 20 minutes without pause, organized and sequential, the way she presented cases for court. Dr. Reeves listened, then said gently, "I want to explore whether some of what you're experiencing might be grief presenting as narrative. It's very common after significant loss too." "I have documentation," Nia said. "Of course. And I'm not dismissing that. I just want to make sure we're not constructing a story that..." Nia stood up, collected her bag, and said, "I'll reschedule when I'm ready." She walked out with 4 minutes left in the session. Vanessa issued a quiet statement to the extended family that week. Nothing dramatic. Vanessa never did anything dramatically. Just a series of phone calls, a few careful texts, a Sunday dinner conversation Nia wasn't present for. The message that circulated was gentle and devastating in equal measure. Nia was struggling. The breakup had hit her harder than anyone realized. She needed patience, not confrontation. If she reached out saying things that seemed alarming, the family should respond with love and not engage the details. A cousin texted, "We love you. Take your time healing." An aunt called and said, "Your mama is worried sick. She just wants her daughter back." Julian sent a single email, 3 lines, "I heard you've been making some calls. I'm sorry you're going through this. I hope you find the peace you're looking for." Nia read it once, forwarded it to Adrienne Cole, then deleted it from her inbox. She was not losing her grip. She was tightening it. Cody James called on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 weeks after their first meeting. His voice had a different quality, not urgency exactly, but the controlled weight of a man who has found what he was looking for and wants to be careful about how he hands it over. "Ms. Carter," he said, "I need you to come in." She was there within the hour. He had recovered deleted text messages. Not from Julian's phone, from a cloud backup connected to an old tablet. The tablet Vanessa had borrowed 18 months ago to help Nia organize her grandmother's estate documents and never fully returned. He turned his monitor toward her. Nia read. And the last version of the story she'd been telling herself, the one where her mother was a lonely woman who got swept up in something she didn't fully understand, turned to ash. If you have enjoyed this story so far, kindly subscribe and hit the notification bell to ensure you're part of the inner circle for every new release. Tell me your favorite part of the story and why you think it's the best. I'd be in the comments section watching and replying to all your messages. The messages went back 14 months before the engagement ended. Not weeks. Not months. 14 months of a coordinated, deliberate thread between Vanessa Carter and Julian Hayes conducted on a platform they believed had been wiped. A messaging app that auto-deleted on the device but retained a ghost copy in a cloud backup Julian had forgotten to disable. James had found it in 40 minutes. He'd seen this particular oversight before. People who are careful about covering tracks are often careless about the infrastructure underneath them. Nia read the thread standing up because she didn't trust her legs to hold her if she sat down. The early messages were logistical. Count numbers. Routing information. The best windows to access Nia's banking app when she was on a long shift and unlikely to check notifications. "She has a 12-hour tomorrow," Vanessa wrote in one message. "Tablet is charged." Julian's reply, "Perfect. I'll handle the transfer tonight." That was month 1. By month 4, the messages had changed in tone. Less operational. More intimate in the particular way of two people who have begun to enjoy what they're doing together. The language of accomplices who have crossed enough lines that honesty between them costs nothing because neither can afford to look away first. "She's been asking questions about the investment account," Vanessa wrote. "I told her I'd help her organize it properly. She believed me." Julian, "Of course she did. She always does." Vanessa, "She thinks competence is the same as trustworthiness. I raised her to be competent. I should know." Nia's eyes moved over that line twice. "She thinks competence is the same as trustworthiness." She kept reading. Psychologists who study betrayal trauma note that the deepest psychological damage doesn't come from the betrayal itself. It comes from the realization that your own perception of safety was the weapon used against you. Closer the relationship, the more precise the damage. By month 7, Vanessa's messages had shed the last pretense of strategic language and become something more honest and more disturbing. The references to Nia as the admired one, to Sunday dinners where everyone asks about her work, her cases, her opinions, like I'm not sitting at my own table, to years of watching her daughter receive the particular warmth that Vanessa had decided somewhere along the way belonged to her instead. She's always been the one people see, Vanessa wrote. I built her. And nobody sees that part. Julian's reply was brief and practiced, the response of a man who knew exactly what note to strike. They will. When this is done, they'll only remember what you built for yourself. Vanessa, that's all I ever wanted. James gave Nia a glass of water she didn't ask for and didn't drink. He let her stand there and read until she reached the end of the thread, and then he sat quietly while she put the pages down and looked at the window for a long moment. The jealousy, she said. Not a question. Long-standing, James said carefully. Based on the language pattern. She didn't fall for him. No. She found him useful. That's my read, James said. And based on the timeline, the introduction may not have been as accidental as you were led to believe. Nia thought about the fundraiser in Midtown where she'd met Julian. The one Vanessa had suggested she attend because it would be good for her professionally. The one Vanessa had offered to buy her dress for, had called the morning to ask what she was wearing, had asked about afterward with the particular quality of attention Nia now understood was not maternal interest. She sent him to me. She filed the updated evidence with Adrian Cole that afternoon. Adrian reviewed it within 2 hours and called back to say 2 things. First, that they now had grounds for a conspiracy charge in addition to the fraud and forgery counts, and second, that Nia needed to be careful. Careful how? Nia asked. People who have built something this deliberately don't dismantle it quietly when they feel it coming apart, Adrian said. Be aware of your surroundings. Don't be predictable about your schedule. And if anything feels wrong, not probably wrong, just slightly wrong, you call me and you call the other number you gave me. She meant Duan. Nia understood. 3 days later, she came out of her apartment building at 7 a.m. to find her car window shattered. Glass across the driver's seat in a clean, deliberate spread. Not a rock, not a random break-in. Nothing taken. Just the window and on the driver's seat a piece of paper folded once. Let it go. Her hands were steady when she photographed it. Steadier than they had any right to be. She called Adrian first. Then Duan. She stood on the sidewalk outside her building in the early morning Atlanta light while her neighbors walked past with coffee cups and dogs and the ordinary rhythm of people who were not standing in the middle of something like this. Duan arrived in 22 minutes. He came alone, which surprised her. He looked at the car, at the note, at the angle of the brake, and said nothing for a moment. Then he made a call, brief, Korean, clipped, and within the hour a man named Seo had pulled building security footage from the past 72 hours and was reviewing it on a laptop in Nia's kitchen while she made coffee because she needed something to do with her hands. Seo found it in 40 minutes. A gray sedan, no plates, the driver obscured, but the car itself traced through traffic camera footage to a rental agency in Buckhead. The rental was booked under a shell company. The shell company, after 40 more minutes of Seo's quiet, relentless attention, connected to a holding account in Julian's business network. Duan showed Nia the chain of evidence without commentary. She looked at it. Then she said, "My mother authorized this." Duan said, "Yes. Not probably. Not it seems like. Just yes." Vanessa Carter, composed, church-going, ivory silk at her own wedding, had looked at her daughter's growing proximity to the truth and made a calculation. And the calculation had not included her daughter's safety as a variable worth protecting. Nia sat down at her kitchen table. Coffee maker finished. Team rose. Side her window, Atlanta kept moving. She doesn't mind, Nia said quietly. And not with horror. With the particular flatness of someone who has finally stopped being surprised. She actually doesn't mind. Duan sat across from her. He didn't try to soften it. He didn't offer an alternative explanation or a more generous read. He just sat there, present and steady, in the specific way of someone who understands that sometimes the most useful thing you can do for a person is refuse to look away with them. "What do you want to do?" he said. Nia looked at him across her kitchen table. This man who had shown up every time without being asked, who had told her the truth without being prompted, who had read her evidence and believed her before she had a name for what she was dealing with. "I want to finish it," she said. Duan nodded once. "Then we finish it," he said. He didn't move loudly. That was the thing about Cha Duan that Nia kept returning to in the weeks that followed. Not his resources, not his reach, not the quiet efficiency with which things got handled. It was the absence of noise around all of it. No announcements. No demonstrations. Just results, appearing like weather, like they had always been inevitable. Hannah arrived at Nia's apartment the morning after the car window with a duffel bag, a laptop, and the particular energy of someone who had been briefed thoroughly and found the assignment interesting. She was late 20s, Korean, with short hair and an expression that managed to be simultaneously warm and completely unreadable. She sat up at Nia's kitchen table like she'd been working there for years, organized her files in silence, made tea without being asked, and said, "Duan asked me to stay close while the case develops. I'll be out of your way." She was never out of Nia's way. She was also, within 48 hours, indispensable. Hannah had a background Nia didn't ask about directly and Duan described only as broad, which she understood to mean financial intelligence, surveillance, and the kind of document analysis that didn't appear in any official job description. She worked through Nia's evidence files with methodical precision, cross-referencing dates, building a master timeline that mapped every fraudulent transaction against Nia's known work schedule, Vanessa's phone records, and Julian's business activity. Picture that emerged was not complicated. It was just comprehensive. And comprehensiveness in a courtroom was everything. "The DA's office needs a clean narrative," Adrian had said in their last meeting. "Not just evidence, sequence, motive, method, opportunity. Jury members aren't forensic accountants. They need to be able to follow it like a story." Hannah built them the story. Meanwhile, Duan worked a parallel track that he was transparent with Nia about, not because he needed her permission, but because he had decided early that she would be told everything that affected her, and he kept that decision without exception. Through his network, he identified 2 former associates of Julian's consulting firm who had been quietly pushed out 18 months earlier. Both had signed NDAs. Both, when approached through the right channels, were willing to speak to a criminal investigator about what they'd witnessed internally. One of them, a woman named Priya who had handled Julian's business accounts before her termination, had kept copies of documents she was never supposed to have, stored on a personal drive out of nothing more than instinct. Instinct, it turned out, was admissible. The False Claims Act, originally passed during the Civil War to combat defense contractor fraud, allows private citizens who uncover fraud to file suit on behalf of the government and receive a portion of recovered funds. It has resulted in over $70 billion in recovered money since 1986. Priya didn't know this law by name. She just knew something was wrong and held on to the proof. Priya's documents showed Julian using Nia's income verification, obtained through Vanessa, to qualify for a commercial property loan that was technically structured as a business asset but used to fund the renovation of the Cascade Heights house. Vanessa's house. The house where Vanessa now lived with Julian. Built in part with Nia's financial identity. Nia read that particular finding on a Tuesday evening sitting at her kitchen table while Hannah worked quietly across from her, and rain came down outside the window in the steady, indifferent way Atlanta rain does in October. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "She renovated her house with my credit." Hannah looked up. "Yes, I've been to that house. I sat in that kitchen." A pause. "I had dinner there the week after I filed the police report. She made cornbread dressing." Hannah held her gaze steadily. "I know." Nia closed the folder. In the evenings, when Hannah had packed up her laptop and the day's work was as complete as it was going to be, Duan came. Not every evening. 3-4 times a week, enough to be a presence, not enough to be a pressure. He brought food sometimes, the kind that required no explanation. Doenjang jjigae in a container from a restaurant in Doraville rice, the small side dishes that appeared without fanfare and tasted like someone had paid attention. He learned quickly that Nia didn't want to be asked if she was okay. She wanted to eat and talk about something real and not perform her own recovery for an audience. So they talked about real things. He told her about arriving in Atlanta at 8 years old from Busan. Not romanticized, just factual, the specific texture of being a Korean kid in DeKalb County in the mid-90s, learning the city's particular social geography faster than he learned English because the social geography had more immediate consequences. She told him about her grandmother, the woman who had funded Nia's education from a savings account built over 40 years of domestic work, and never once described it as sacrifice. He told her about his cousin, Minjun's mother, who had been the steadiest person in his life until she wasn't. Nia told him about the child welfare case. The full version. The pressure from above, the specific language used to suggest the case wasn't worth pursuing. The morning she decided to escalate it anyway because Minjun had looked at her during a home visit with the eyes of a child who had already learned not to expect much. "I didn't know it was connected to you," she said. "I didn't know anything about the placement irregularities or the fund mismanagement. I just knew he needed to go home." Duan was quiet for a moment. "That's exactly why it mattered," he said. There was an evening in the third week when they were on her balcony after dinner. The city spread below them doing its usual thing, and Duan said something that stayed with her long after. "You know what I noticed that first night? At the wedding." "What?" "You were the only person in that room who wasn't performing something," he said. "Everyone else was performing joy or performing normalcy or performing not noticing. You were just present, absorbing it, not pretending it wasn't what it was." He looked at her. "That takes more strength than performing does. Most people don't have it." Nia looked out at the city. "I used to think being the one who holds it together was a skill," she said. "Now I think it was just what I did instead of asking for help." Duan nodded slowly. "Those things can both be true." She looked at him. This man who had walked into the worst night of her life and stayed. Not dramatically, not with declarations, just with the steady, unglamorous consistency of someone who had made a decision and was keeping it. She kissed him. Not urgently. Not as punctuation on a dramatic moment. Just because he was there and she wanted to, and for the first time in longer than she could accurately remember, wanting something felt like sufficient reason to reach for it. He kissed her back with the same quality, present, deliberate, like a man who had been waiting without demanding and was now simply here. They didn't name it that night. Didn't need to. Some things don't require announcement. They just require two people willing to stop pretending they don't feel them. The story is far from over. Subscribe now and hit that bell so you're first in line when the next chapter hits. No spoilers for those who sleep on it. No replays for those who weren't watching. This inner circle moves fast. Get in now or spend tomorrow catching up. Fulton County Superior Court smelled like every courthouse Nia had ever been in. Floor cleaner, recycled air, the particular staleness of a building where difficult things happen on a schedule. She had been in courtrooms before. Testified on behalf of clients, filed emergency custody motions, sat through hearings that would determine whether children went home or stayed in the system. She knew how to inhabit a courtroom professionally. But there was a specific quality to walking into this one. In her deep green blazer, James beside her with a binder 3 inches thick, Adrian at the prosecution table already arranging documents with the focused efficiency of a woman who had done this many times and still took every case personally. Julian and Vanessa were tried together on coordinated charges: identity theft, financial fraud, forgery in the first degree, and conspiracy. Their attorneys had spent the weeks before trial attempting to separate the cases, each client's defense depending heavily on redirecting blame toward the other. The judge had denied both motions. Coordination between them was the point. Separating them would have been like trying the hand without the brain. Julian arrived in a charcoal suit. Measured. His attorney was downtown polished, the kind of man who spoke in complete sentences and made reasonable sound like absolute. Julian looked at Nia once when he entered. She looked back without expression, then returned to her notes. Vanessa arrived in navy. Composed, as she always was, spine straight, reading glasses in her hand like she was here for a board meeting. She did not look at Nia. Not once. Not during the entire first day of testimony. Under Georgia law, identity fraud carries a penalty of 1 to 10 years per count. Conspiracy adds an additional layer. When 2 or more people coordinate to commit a crime, each is legally responsible for the actions of the other in furtherance of that conspiracy. It is, as Adrian had explained to Nia, the charge that makes the whole structure collapse at once. Prosecution opened with Cody James on the stand. He walked the jury through the forensic timeline with the patience and precision of a man who genuinely loved his work. Every account, every date, every transaction mapped against Nia's work schedule, demonstrating that access occurred during windows when she was documented as being on shift at her job. He presented the handwriting analysis confirming that the signatures on the loan documents were not Nia's, not close approximations, not ambiguous, definitively forged. He presented the cloud backup messages. When the messages were read aloud in the courtroom, something shifted in the room's atmosphere. Not dramatically. Courtrooms don't work like films. There was no audible gasp. Just a stillness, jurors sitting slightly differently in their chairs, the court reporter's fingers moving steadily over her keys, a journalist in the gallery writing something quickly in a notebook. She thinks competence is the same as trustworthiness. I raised her to be competent. I should know. Julian's attorney objected to the characterization of the messages as evidence of conspiracy versus personal correspondence. The judge overruled it in 4 words and moved on. Priya testified on day 2. She was precise and unshakable, presenting the document she had kept for 18 months with the quiet authority of someone who had always known this day was coming and had prepared accordingly. She walked the jury through the commercial property loan, the renovation funds, the income verification obtained using Nia's documentation. Julian's attorney cross-examined her for 40 minutes and did not land a single meaningful blow. Vanessa's attorney put Vanessa on the stand. This was either brave or desperate, and within 7 minutes it was clearly the latter. Vanessa testified that she had been manipulated by Julian. That she was a grieving widow, lonely and vulnerable, who had been slowly drawn into something she didn't fully understand until it was too late. Her voice was steady and her posture was perfect, and she delivered the performance with genuine skill because Vanessa Carter had been performing composure her entire life and it was, without question, her most developed talent. Then Adrian stood up. She walked Vanessa through the messages chronologically. Not all of them. The specific ones, the ones where Vanessa initiated. The ones where Vanessa provided account information Julian hadn't asked for. The ones where Vanessa described her own daughter in language that no defense narrative about manipulation could adequately explain. I built her. And nobody sees that part. Mrs. Carter, Adrian said. Did Julian Hayes ask you to provide your daughter's banking login on the evening of October 14th? A pause. He mentioned he needed access too. Did he ask you directly, yes or no? Another pause. Longer. He expressed that it would be helpful. Mrs. Carter. According to the message thread recovered from the cloud backup you wrote, and I'm quoting directly, I already have what you need. Give me until tonight. That message was sent 4 hours before any communication from Mr. Hayes requesting account information. Adrian looked at her steadily. Who was leading this arrangement, Mrs. Carter? Courtroom was very still. Vanessa said nothing. Her attorney objected. The judge sustained it. But the jury had heard the question and watched the silence that answered it, and in a courtroom, silence is testimony. Nia testified on day 3. She walked to the stand in her green blazer with her notes she didn't need and her hands she kept still through deliberate decision. She described 5 years of building something with a man who was dismantling her on a parallel track. She described the wedding, the burnt orange dress, the 3rd row, the bank notification at 8:47 p.m. She described calling her mother afterward, being told she was destabilized, watching her community close around her like water filling a space. She described Cody James saying this is real and what those words did to something she had been pressing down for weeks. The defense attorney cross-examined her with the framing they had committed to, bitter ex-fiancé, couldn't accept being left, constructed a narrative to destroy a man who had simply moved on. He was smooth about it, which made it worse. Nia let him finish. Then she said, I have a question. The attorney blinked. I'm sorry. You've described me as someone who constructed a narrative. I'd like to know which part was constructed. She looked at him with the particular calm of a woman who has been called dramatic one too many times by people who needed her to be. The forged signatures? The forensic accountant's testimony? The cloud messages my mother sent? The rental car footage? The NDA my ex-fiancé paid 2 former employees to sign? She paused. Which part of the narrative did I construct? The attorney said nothing. Adrian didn't object. The judge looked almost imperceptibly amused. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Nia sat at the prosecution table and listened to the foreperson read each count. Guilty. 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 Julian Hayes and Vanessa Carter on all counts together the way they had built it. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Adrian would push for maximum restitution and prison time. Commercial property would be seized. Cascade Heights renovation, built with Nia's stolen credit, would be factored into the restitution calculation. When the gavel came down, Nia sat still for a moment. Then Vanessa turned. For the first time since the trial began, she looked directly at her daughter. Her composure had finally come apart, not dramatically, just at the edges, the careful architecture of her face losing its hold in small, visible places. Her eyes were wet. Her mouth opened like she was going to say something. Like there was something that could still be said. Nia held her mother's gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she stood, gathered her notes, and turned toward the door. Marcus was in the gallery. He had come on the second day without announcement and had been there every day since, quietly in the 4th row in the dark blue jacket he wore when he wanted to look reliable. He caught her eye as she moved toward the exit. He didn't say anything. Just nodded, the way you do when words are insufficient and you know it. She nodded back. Sighed, the afternoon light hit the courthouse steps at a low angle, turning everything briefly gold. Atlanta moved below the steps in every direction, indifferent, alive, unbothered by what had just concluded in the room above. Nia stood on the top step and breathed. Not relief exactly. Not triumph. Something quieter and more structural, the feeling of a weight that has been load-bearing for so long you forgot you were carrying it finally completely set down. Her phone buzzed. Duan, how are you? She looked at the message. Looked at the city. Looked at her own hands, still, steady, belonging entirely to her. She typed back, free. Then she walked down the steps into the afternoon and didn't look back at the building once. 9 months is not a long time. It is long enough, though. Long enough for a credit score to climb from 490 to 704. Long enough for a savings account built from zero to hold $70,000 that belongs to nobody but the woman who put it there. Long enough for restitution payments to begin arriving on the 1st of every month. Court-ordered, automatic, Julian's and Vanessa's combined obligation deposited into an account Nia had opened specifically for recovery, an account whose existence felt, every time she checked it, like a small, precise act of justice. Long enough to learn who you are when nobody needs you to be anything in particular. She was clinical director now. The nonprofit in West End served 340 children annually, foster youth, court-involved kids, teenagers aging out of a system that treated 18 like a finish line rather than a starting point. Nia had restructured the intake process in her first month, cross-trained 3 caseworkers in trauma-informed interviewing, and fought successfully for a budget increase by presenting the board with a 5-year outcome analysis that made the numbers impossible to argue with. She was not performing competence anymore. She was just competent, which turned out to feel completely different. Her team listened to her. Not because she demanded it. Because she had earned it in the specific currency of people who show up, do the work, and tell the truth about what they see. Studies on post-traumatic growth, a concept developed by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun in the 1990s, found that a significant portion of trauma survivors don't just recover to their previous baseline. They surpass it. The research suggests that the process of rebuilding identity after catastrophic loss can produce stronger psychological architecture than what existed before. Not despite the breaking. 'Cause of it. Nia had read that study during her lunch break one afternoon and sat with it for a long time. Not because it was comforting. Because it was true and she had a complicated relationship with things that were true. She needed to look at them directly before she could trust them. She trusted this one. Min-Jun visited the office on a Friday in October. Hannah brought him, officially a field trip, a cultural exchange component of a school program that Hannah had arranged with the kind of quiet efficiency that characterized everything she did. He arrived in a school uniform with his backpack on both shoulders, and an expression of serious assessment that Nia recognized immediately as the same expression he wore in the photograph Duan had shown her in the hotel lobby 11 months ago. He was taller than she expected. Gap-toothed still. Eyes that moved around the office cataloging everything before he committed to being interested in any of it. Hannah introduced them in the reception area. Nia crouched down to his eye level, social worker reflex, the instinct to remove height from an interaction with a child who had reasons to find adults untrustworthy. "I've heard about you," Nia said. Min-Jun studied her with the specific gravity of an 8-year-old who took information seriously. "Duan said you helped me go home," he said. His English was careful and deliberate. "I just did my job," Nia said. He considered this. Duan says that's what people say when they did more than their job. Nia looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled, not the professional one, not the composed one. The real one, the one that came from somewhere she hadn't fully had access to until recently. He's not wrong, she said. Minjun reached into his backpack and produced a drawing, pencil and crayon on notebook paper, a rooftop scene with stick figures and what appeared to be an extremely detailed skyline. He held it out with the solemnity of someone presenting credentials. I drew Atlanta, he said. Hannah said you live here. Nia took the drawing with both hands. I'll put it in my office, she said. And she meant it. And she did. Vanessa's letter arrived on a Tuesday. 3 pages, handwritten on the cream stationery she had always used for important correspondence. Birthday cards, condolence notes, the letter she had written to Nia's college when Nia was 17 asking them to consider her application with particular attention. The handwriting was recognizable and slightly changed, a little less controlled than Nia remembered, the hand of a woman writing in a context that made precision difficult. Nia made coffee first. Then she sat at her kitchen table and read it. Vanessa did not excuse herself. That was the first thing Nia noticed. The letter contained no architecture of self-justification, no careful repositioning of blame, no version of events designed to make the reader understand. Just acknowledgement. The bare-bones kind, stripped of performance because there was no audience left worth performing for. I have been jealous of you since you were 19 years old. I know how that sounds. I know what it means about me. I don't have a way to make it sound like something else, so I won't try. You were everything I worked to create, and I resented you for becoming it. That is the ugliest sentence I have ever written, and it is completely true. Julian didn't find me. I found him. Or I made space for him in a way that amounted to the same thing. I told myself it was complicated. It wasn't complicated. I was your mother, and I chose someone who wanted to take from you, and I helped him do it. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I'm writing because you deserve to know that I know exactly what I did and I know exactly what it cost you, and I am going to spend whatever time I have left understanding why I was capable of it. You were always the best thing I made. That was the problem. And that was never your fault. Nia read it once. She sat with it for a long time, not with grief exactly, not with the particular ache of a wound being reopened. With something more like the feeling of a door that has been locked for a long time finally showing you the keyhole. Not open. Just visible. She folded the letter and put it in the drawer of her bedside table. Not in the trash. Not on display. In the drawer, where things go when you're not finished with them but you're not ready to decide what they mean. She did not write back. Some responses need more time than 9 months. Some need more than a lifetime. She was willing to find out which this was, but she was not willing to rush the answer to make someone else more comfortable. Not anymore. The sentencing had come 6 weeks after the verdict. Julian, 2 years, Fulton County Correctional Institution. Full restitution $94,000 payable monthly. His consulting business dissolved. His commercial property in Buckhead, seized and liquidated, proceeds applied to the restitution order. His professional network, the carefully assembled contacts and relationships he had spent years collecting like currency, had evaporated within 2 weeks of the guilty verdict. People who build their reputation on the appearance of success are uniquely vulnerable to its removal. Julian Hayes had nothing left that wasn't borrowed, and every debt had come due at once. Vanessa, 18 months, with eligibility for early release pending the review board's assessment. Cascade Heights house, the one renovated with Nia's stolen credit, was placed under a court lien. Whatever equity existed in it would go toward restitution before Vanessa saw a dollar. Adrian had called to give Nia the sentencing details, and Nia had listened and thanked her and hung up and made herself dinner. Pasta. A glass of red wine she'd been saving. Felt like sufficient occasion. On a Thursday evening in late October, Duan took her to the restaurant in Doraville. The same family-owned Korean place he had mentioned months ago. Small, warm, handwritten menus, the kind of establishment where the owner knows your order before you sit down and treats regulars with the particular affection of someone who has decided you belong there. The owner's wife brought banchan to the table without being asked, pickled radish, spinach, cucumber, and patted Duan's arm in the manner of a woman who had watched him eat alone for too many years and approved of the change. They ordered galbi, rice, a stew that arrived in a stone pot still boiling the way it was supposed to. They ate in the comfortable silence that had become their particular language, not the silence of people with nothing to say, but the silence of people who have said enough hard, true things to each other that quiet no longer requires filling. Hannah told me about the drawing, Duan said eventually. He's gifted, Nia said. The skyline alone. He wants to be an architect. He's 8. He's been saying it since he was 6. Duan looked at her with the quiet directness she had come to understand as his version of warmth. Not performed, not decorative, just honest attention directed without apology. He asked if you come to his school thing next month. A presentation. He wants to show his class what Atlanta looks like from above. Nia looked up from her bowl. He wants me there? He asked specifically. A pause. I told him I'd ask you. She thought about a 5-year-old boy in a foster placement looking at a caseworker with the eyes of a child who had stopped expecting much. She thought about the decision she had made in that moment. Not heroic, not calculated, just the basic refusal to let the easier thing win. Tell him yes, she said. Duan nodded. Picked up his chopsticks. Then set them back down, which was unusual. He ate with the same focused efficiency he brought to everything. I need to tell you something, he said. Nia waited. The situation I mentioned months ago, the rival organization, the pressure on my operations. He met her eyes. It's resolved. My world is not without danger. It will never be entirely without danger. But the specific threat that existed when I warned you, it's gone. How gone? Completely. She nodded slowly. Are you telling me because you think it changes something? I'm telling you because you deserve current information about what being near me costs. He held her gaze. And because the cost has changed. I wanted you to know. Nia looked at this man across a table in a warm restaurant in Doraville, with Banchum between them and the owner's wife watching from the kitchen doorway with unconcealed satisfaction. This man who had shown up on the worst night of her life and told her the truth and then kept telling it every time without softening it for his own comfort or hers. Duan, she said. Yes. I'm not going anywhere. He held her gaze for a moment. Then something in his face shifted, not dramatically, not with a performance of emotion. Just a slight release, the way a building looks different when a load-bearing thing is finally properly supported. He picked up his chopsticks. Good, he said. They walked afterward through the neighborhood, October air carrying the first real suggestion of winter, the streets quiet and lit in amber. She put her hand in his without announcement. He closed his fingers around hers without making it a moment. They walked in silence for a while. Then Nia said, I read somewhere that the human hand has 27 bones. More than almost any other part of the body. She looked straight ahead. All that structured just to hold things. Duan was quiet for a beat. Or let them go, he said. She squeezed his hand. They kept walking. Her apartment was quiet when she got home. The good kind of quiet, chosen, not imposed. She hung her jacket, made tea, stood at her kitchen window looking out at Atlanta doing its nighttime thing, indifferent and bright and completely unaware that anything significant had happened in it today. Minjun's drawing was on her refrigerator now, held up by a magnet from a conference she'd attended in March. The skyline rendered in crayon by an 8-year-old who wanted to be an architect. Recognizable, earnest, more accurate than it had any right to be. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop, pulled up her savings account, $70,340, and her credit report, 704 and climbing, and her calendar for next month where she had already, before he asked, left the date of Minjun's school presentation unscheduled because something had told her to. She closed the laptop, made her tea, sat on her couch in her apartment that smelled like her and belonged to her and held no version of anyone else's life inside it. And for the first time in 32 years, Nia Carter took up exactly as much space as she needed. Not performing strength. Not managing someone else's comfort. Not making herself smaller so the room could feel larger for people who never deserved the extra space. Just here. Pull. Hers. You didn't stumble onto this channel by accident. You were looking for something that actually moves you, and now you found it. Don't lose it. Subscribe right now, hit the notification bell, and become part of a community that lives for stories this good. Tell me in the comments, what was the moment that got you? I want to know. I'll be there waiting.